Hello, everyone, boys and girls, idiots and geniuses. Welcome to my channel. Yup, that's right, you've noticed it. I'm using my real voice. You may be wondering why. Well, a year or so ago, I promised that I'd use my real voice. And I'm going to live up to my promises. So here I am. This is my real voice. Welcome to the channel.
Alright, so with the voice reveal out of the way, let's get to the main uh, topic of the video. Bizarro, Superman's clone, or duplication, whatever you want to call him. This guy has been in comics since Superboy issue 68, back in, I don't know, whatever time the comic was released. And ever since then, he has kept appearing in media repeatedly. But why? Why do people like him so much? Heck, why is he one of my favorite DC characters? Well, let's dive into his history and find out. Superboy first appeared in Superman issue 68. In this issue, Superboy and a scientist were using a new thing invented by the scientist called a duplicator ray. However, the duplicator ray did not make perfect things, it made imperfect things. For example, if you duplicated a diamond or a piece of food, it would make an imperfect version of that item. So, when the scientist accidentally tripped on the duplicator ray while Superboy was in front of it, it hit him, creating Bizarro Superboy. At first, the two assumed that because it's imperfect duplicate, it wasn't alive, and it didn't appear to be moving either. So they just cleaned up the debris the explosion from creating Bizarro Superboy caused, and went about their day. However, when they went to go take care of the body of the imperfect duplicate, they found that it was gone. Superboy followed after it, and that's how Bizarro Superboy got his name. He overheard Superboy calling him Bizarre, and he mistook it for Bizarro, hence coining it as his name. Now, like the person he's created from, Superboy, Bizarro just wanted to help people. However, they weren't exactly in the best mood to be helped by a guy with white cracked skin. And it didn't help that when Bizarro Superboy saw his own reflection, he was disgusted by it, and not knowing it was his reflection, threw a truck into the window. Now, naturally, a freak causing destruction in Smallville alerted the local authorities. The scientist who felt responsible for Bizarro's creation, which, let's be honest, he was the one who accidentally created him, had the police start shooting Bizarro because he, in their eyes, is a dangerous monster. Bizarro was offended by this. He wasn't hurt by the bullets, he was just offended that they wanted to hurt him in the first place. And honestly, who can blame him? Like, dude just came to life and people are hating on him and trying to kill him as he just popped out of the womb, so to speak.
Having Superboy's memories, he went to the Kent household, where Ma Kent was making some food, and Bizarro, hungry, tried to help her. Then he went up to his room where he played, well, Superboy's room, but like he had the memories of Superboy, so technically his room in his mind, I guess. I don't know. And he began playing with the robots of Superboy. Then he went back downstairs to eat, and like everyone else, Ma Kent was horrified to see Bizarro and screamed at him. This, again, offended Bizarro because, like, who else wants to hear their mother call them a freak or a monster? So Bizarro went to go find a new family, which he did. This new family was just as horrified by them, but Dad, not knowing if Bizarro was dangerous or not, made the right idea. Sorry, I mean the husband, not dad. He's not Bizarro's dad. Anyway, and they pretended to adopt Bizarro. Bizarro began acting like their child, then put on a scarecrow suit and went out into town. But this didn't exactly disguise him. I mean, it kind of did, but like people didn't notice him. Then we took the suit off, he was right back at square one. Then he met a girl, and the girl was nice to him. Unbeknownst to Bizarro, the only reason why she was nice to him was because she was blind, which, ouch, that's gotta hurt. Imagine the only girl who's nice to you is nice to you because she has no eyesight. I'd be devastated. Anyway, Bizarro then went to fly off, now having a new friend to go get something for her. I don't know. Later, Superboy would find Bizarro laying on the ground. Assuming he was dead, he would bring him back to the scientist and then head home to go to sleep. Anyway, the next day, the scientist would find that Bizarro was indeed still alive and realized, oh wait, just because he's not awake doesn't mean he's not alive because his fake heart wouldn't beat and his fake lungs wouldn't breathe because he's an imperfect duplicate. So then Bizarro went to the school where he found Melissa was going into the school. He decided to naturally wait for Melissa to come out, but while doing that, he decided to have some fun of his own. He joined Clark Kent and the other boys in the gym, but given his strength, which even he didn't know how strong he was, he began to destroy things. This began to make him a problem for the others. When the boys tried to get in his way, he threw Clark Kent. Now, as you know, Clark is Superboy, so Clark simply secretly used his powers that way he wouldn't expose his identity. Bizarro was then chastised by the other boys for nearly killing Clark, and so left. Superboy then remembered that he came from Krypton, so he decided the only way to stop Bizarro was to get some kryptonite. Using his own body as a bit of a metal detector, he found the kryptonite, put on a lead knight armor, and then threw it at Bizarro. But to his shock, Bizarro was immune. Bizarro then proceeded to throw the kryptonite right back at Superboy, incapacitating him, and then the radiation started soaking him, and well, you know what happens to Superman when he gets hit by kryptonite. Then Bizarro wondered, hey, what if I can make Superman into my friend? What if I can make him my pal? So he decided to create, when he found out they were making a statue of Superboy, he decided to create his own Mount Rushmore style Superboy statue. However, when out external forces eroded the statue, it turned into a statue of Bizarro. This caused the people on the airplane, who apparently had previously seen Bizarro, which I don't know how that works. Maybe they were the same people who saw him on the ground. Whatever the case, they believed that Super Bizarro was making himself known and to be a threat. The police officers then found Superboy passed out, collected the kryptonite, causing him to wake up. Superboy then came up with a plan and had the army wait for Bizarro as Superboy lured Bizarro via a puppet of Melissa all the way to the military. The military then proceeded to open fire on Bizarro. Given that Bizarro is like Superman, immune to almost all weaponry, none of it injured him. Like Superboy even tried to jump in himself and fight Bizarro, but it didn't work because Bizarro was immune to it all. Bizarro just thought they were playing some sort of game with him, and uh, well, they weren't, but it was fun for Bizarro at least. Then Bizarro tried to take the puppet Melissa back with him, but it turned to pieces, causing Bizarro to assume that Melissa had died. Superboy revealed the truth, and angry, the two fought once more, and it again failed. Then, when Bizarro was retreating, suddenly Bizarro felt some sort of radiation which injured him. Superboy was all like, "There's no kryptonite around. What radiation is he feeling?" So he decided to follow Bizarro. Bizarro then went back to the real Melissa, and overhearing her have a conversation with her aunt in which she wished there was a bubbling spring in the water, he decided to make her dreams come true by creating a spring. Unbeknownst to him, she couldn't really see, she's blind, as I said before, so she fell into the spring, causing him to discover it. And Bizarro realized she was blind. He, of course, helped her out, given that he's a good guy rather than the monster everyone else thinks he is, but he was now heartbroken because his only friend was only friends with him because they were blind and couldn't see him. Otherwise, they'd be scared of him like everyone else, which, honestly, isn't that a horrible reality to live in? Like, imagine having a friend, but that friend can only be friends with you if they're blind, because if they actually see you, they'd be terrified of you. In any case, Superboy discovered that Bizarro was being harmed by the same debris that created him. So, using the debris, he went after Bizarro. However, by this point, Bizarro wasn't exactly excited to be alive anymore. He was hated by all, had gotten into two battles, both with Superman and the US military. So at this point, he didn't want to live anymore. So when Superboy was all like, "Oh, I got this thing that can kill you," Bizarro was all like, "Say less, bro," and came right at Superboy, causing an explosion. And then some bullcrap happened in which the explosion reactivated Melissa's eyes, giving her eyesight. Superboy came up with the conclusion that Bizarro sacrificed himself, which I guess the writers came up with so that way Bizarro's death wasn't sad and depressing as it already is.
Years later, Lex Luthor would somehow learn of Bizarro, which I guess someone managed to get a good picture of him, even though I didn't see any reports in the previous story. Lex would then proceed to recreate the duplicator ray, which, like last time, created imperfect duplicates. Unbeknownst to Lex's assistant, this was Lex's whole plan in the first place. Lex then revealed his plan, which, as usual, was to destroy Superman, and him and Lex got into disguises. At the Daily Planet, where Clark Kent slash Superman now worked, now that he was Superman rather than Superboy, he would get a report that a scientist named Professor Clyde had called Superman, as he had a supposed cure for kryptonite. Like any rational person, Clark could see that this was likely a scam, but decided to check it out anyway, and met with the supposed Professor Clyde. Clyde then had Superman stand in front of the ray, which, how did Superman not recognize it? Like, how does he not have super memory as well? Comics, man, superheroes be making the dumbest decisions. Anyway, Clyde then had Superman stand in front of the ray and shot him with it, creating Bizarro. Lex then revealed himself mm, to Superman's own shock before trying to command Bizarro when Superman threatened to put him back in prison. Fortunately, unlike most iterations, this version of Bizarro wasn't dumb enough to blindly follow Lex's orders and was instead mad at Lex for bringing him back. As despite being considered a separate counterpart to Bizarro Superboy, he evidently remembered everything that Bizarro Superboy went through. Bizarro helped Superman take down Lex and his henchmen. As Superman and Bizarro proceeded to fly the prisoners back to prison, they already began planning to end Bizarro's life, yet again using the same excuse of, technically he's not alive, so it's not murder. However, as they were going to do that, Superman was interrupted by a boat almost crashing into a tidal wave. That honestly looks like that looks like the iceberg that hit the Titanic, and so handed over both criminals to Bizarro to take to prison, which Bizarro did. Bizarro hands over the criminals, and the police chief at first doesn't see he's Bizarro, so Bizarro decides to give Metropolis a chance and sees if they'll be scared of him or not. Newsflash, they are. He reveals his face, and they are scared of him. Bizarro decides to try and prove that he isn't a monster by saving the day. However, it doesn't work, and despite saving people, they still call him a monster, which is just horrible. Like, dude saved all your lives. Without him, you'd be dead. And all of y'all still just call him a monster based on his looks? Racism at its finest. Jeez. Bizarro, hurt by this accidentally causes some havoc, like not looking where he's flying and knocks over a chimney. Meanwhile, Superman is still occupied with the tidal wave and freezes it. Bizarro, after causing a bit of chaos, gets attacked by the US military, who proceed to waste all their weapons on him thinking he's a monster. Bizarro gets sick of it and tells the military to just stop trying to destroy him, as he'll do it himself, which shocks the military. Bizarro then attempts to destroy himself by ramming his body into a mountain, but only succeeds in drilling a hole because, like Superman, he's invulnerable. A picture of him is taken by Lois Lane, Superman's girlfriend. Bizarro overhears Lois, and I guess since he shares somewhat of the memories of Superman, like his Bizarro Superboy counterpart did, overhears her talking about how excellent Superman is. He also remembers that she's his girlfriend. And Bizarro mistakes all this for Lois actually liking him. This causes him to fall in love with Lois, and he begins planning to show his love for her. Superman, meanwhile, returns to find to his shock that Bizarro hasn't caused as much damage as he did last time, and has pretty much disappeared. So he changes back into Clark Kent. Meanwhile, Bizarro kidnaps Lois and brings her to an island where he built a palace, which in reality is just a broken down house. Lois pretends to like it until Bizarro reveals that he wants to marry her, at which point she's all like, "No, I'm loyal to Superman. He is my boyfriend. I want to marry him one day." Bizarro then makes a new plan and steals the duplicator ray from the police officers to duplicate himself, creating new Bizarro, an imperfect duplicate of himself, who has his speech patterns of me, Bizarro, but has Superman's appearance. Unbeknownst to him, Clark was there the whole time when he stole the duplicator ray, and so changes into Superman to follow him. After creating New Bizarro goes on to propose to Lois, who, given that she wanted Superman to marry her so badly already, immediately accepts without a second thought. Not even thinking like, hey, wait a second, this guy speaks weird. He couldn't be Superman. Superman, who's already found the island and sees this going on, prepares to intervene when Bizarro uses a boulder-sized amount of kryptonite to stop Superman from interrupting romance between Lois and New Bizarro. As Bizarro continues his plan to try to get Lois to marry New Bizarro attempts to get Lois to marry him as fast as possible. Fortunately, Lois's brain actually starts working and she realizes, wait a minute, you have a weird voice. You can't be Superman. At first, she accuses New Bizarro of being Bizarro in a Superman disguise when Bizarro reveals himself and confesses the truth to Lois, and that New Bizarro is just a duplicate of him. New Bizarro then turns against Bizarro and tells Lois she should not care about his speech patterns and should just love him because he looks like Superman. Lois scolds New Bizarro for having such sexist beliefs and tells him she prefers Bizarro over him. This causes Bizarro and New Bizarro to get into a scuffle because New Bizarro has turned against Bizarro. However, like how Superman was unable to destroy Bizarro, Bizarro is unable to destroy his quote unquote imperfect duplicate. Bizarro realizes he can't destroy New Bizarro alone, and so destroys the boulder of kryptonite he was using to weaken Superman, causing it to turn to dust. Bizarro then explains himself, and him and Superman team up to go look for New Bizarro. Superman finds him first, but finds him under a storm of kryptonite mist, and curious to see what happens, watches from afar as New Bizarro is disintegrated by the storm. Superman is at first perplexed, but then realizes that New Bizarro, being an imperfect duplicate of Bizarro, inherited all of Superman's stuff except for his speech, meaning that he inherited both Superman's powers and his weaknesses. Then, worried that Bizarro might come back for her, Superman decides to take Lois away. Lois, however, believes that Bizarro won't come back because she told Bizarro straight up that she loves only Superman. Unfortunately, Bizarro proves Lois wrong and believes that that her telling New Bizarro that she preferred Bizarro over him proves his point. And to prove his point even further, he goes to a billboard and begins to peel the petals off a flower billboard. Upon peeling the last petal, in which he says, "She loves me," he believes this to be a sign that she does indeed love him. And so in an attempt to show that he loves her back, he goes to an alien planet and gets a bouquet of flowers. Unfortunately, Bizarro does not account for the differences in climate on this alien planet and Earth. So when he brings it back to Earth, it immediately begins to pop seeds, probably as a sign of aging or coldness. Lois, now agitated, tells Bizarro off for this and tells him, "I don't want to see you again, bro." This hurts Bizarro's feelings and makes him feel like a horrible person, so causing him to leave. Superman comes in and saves Lois, and at first threatens to fight Bizarro until Lois once again, being an idiot, tells Superman, "Hey, it's not needed. I told him that I didn't want to see him again. He should respect that. He loves me too much." However, if there's anything we, the audience, have just learned, it's that Bizarro can't take no for an answer. So, he decides that if Lois doesn't want to see him as Bizarro, then she'll see him as Clark Kent. So he dresses up in Clark's clothes and heads to the Daily Planet. Superman sees Bizarro and, worried that his secret identity will be revealed, follows Bizarro. As Bizarro tries to tell the door greeter or his name, Clark interrupts him using his thunderclap, so that way all the guard hears is Clark. And when Bizarro decides, screw it, and goes in the window, Superman heat visions all the Clark Kent clothes off, revealing the Bizarro suit, which unintentionally reveals Bizarro to Lois. Lois, agitated for the final time, scolds Bizarro and blows up at him, deeply hurting Bizarro's feelings. This enrages Bizarro, who decides, you know what? if I can't have you, Lois, then no one can. So he takes her away to the island. Superman, of course, follows after, drops her off, and says, if you decide you want to marry me, wave the white flag. In the meantime, I'm going to go destroy Superman. Bizarro and Superman meet up, and they begin to fight. Now, given they don't know each other's weaknesses, well, and Bizarro doesn't have any kryptonite with him, they try to find weaknesses on the battlefield. They constantly try to kill each other, try to blow each other up. Bizarro even manages to destroy a Superman dummy, which Superman taunts him for, thinking that it was the real Superman. This causes Bizarro to get even more enraged. Lois is all like, I can't just sit back and watch this, I gotta do something. So, she uses the duplicator ray on herself, creating Bizarro Lois, and then proceeds to wave the white flag, which Bizarro sees and he's all like, oh crap, Lois has decided she wants to marry me. So Bizarro goes down, and Superman is at first fooled by what looks like Lois, and he begs this Lois to reconsider, only to discover it's Bizarro Lois. Lois then explains what happens, and Bizarro and Lois leave Ida Island to go get married somewhere where they will be accepted. Lois, overhearing what Superman said to the Bizarro Lois, not knowing it was Bizarro Lois, reminds Superman, hey, you promised her that if she didn't marry Bizarro, she'd eventually become Mrs. Superman. So what does that say for me since that you meant that for me? And Superman is like, yeah, I'll marry you eventually. Lois is a bit annoyed, but understands because she loves Superman. She's all like, my duplicate got her guy immediately, but I guess I'll have to wait a little longer.
Bizarro would continue to appear in other storylines. For example, in Action Comics issues 263 to 264, in which Bizarro and Bizarro Lois found their own abandoned planet to inhabit. However, lonely from the lack of inhabitants on this new world that they dubbed Hetstre, or Bizarro World. I don't know how you pronounce the previous word because it's basically Earth spelt backwards. Anyway, um, Bizarro would edit the duplicator array to make duplicates of only Bizarro and Bizarro Lois. Sometime later, Superman would eventually pass by the planet while towing a meteor. He would stumble upon Hestre, or however it's pronounced, or Bizarro World, whatever you like to call it, and would see how reversed the planet was. Upon seeing the shabby, rundown houses on Bizarro World, Superman would attempt to help the Bizarros, not knowing that perfecting things is a crime on Bizarro World, which would get him arrested and imprisoned. Given that Superman follows the law, even the laws of other planets, he willingly let himself be turned in. While waiting for his court date, he would be met by the original Bizarro Lois, who informed Superman that she would get him declared innocent as long as he agreed to marry her. Superman naturally rejected this as he was only in love with the real Lois and not the Bizarro version. Then, when his court date finally came, the jilted Bizarro Lois had Superman deemed guilty, angry that he rejected her, and the Bizarros proceeded to use the duplicator ray on Superman, turning him into another Bizarro. Superman would then flee Bizarro World because now all the Bizarro Loises were in love with him and wanted to marry him now that he looked like a Bizarro. So, in an attempt to disguise himself on Earth, he went to the Fortress of Solitude and wore a fake mask and gloves. But during a missile test, it destroyed the mask, revealing his Bizarro-like form. This caused him to be mistaken for a Bizarro and attacked by the military. So, he attempted to tell his co-workers and boss, Lois, Jimmy, and Perry, that he was Superman. No, none of them believed him, and Lois even accused Superman of committing his own murder as Bizarro. So he was arrested, and given that Superman still follows the law even under this type of circumstance, he willingly let himself be arrested and stayed in prison until he could prove that he was Superman. And however, this is revealed to just be a dream that Superman had while in prison. However, the whole sentence of him being turned into Bizarro is actually potentially real.
Superman was then put into a gladiatorial arena for his court thing and was forced to fight multiple prisoner Bizarros using a weapon. He managed to defeat all of them, granting him an extended court date. And when he came to the extended court, while waiting in prison for his extended court date, a Bizarro Lois who posed as the original Bizarro Lois tried to break him out of prison. She was caught and arrested, and then the next day, Superman once again goes to court. And this time he makes a deal with the court although if he can find one perfect thing about Bizarro World. They agree to this, thinking that it's impossible as they've made Bizarro World quote unquote perfectly imperfect, if you will. So Superman makes a satellite and shows the Bizarros that their world is still a sphere rather than a cube. With this now revealed, Superman is set free, but Superman, feeling bad for the Bizarros, uses a bulldozer to turn their world into a cube, making them all happy. Superman then returns home, and everything goes back to normal for him. Eventually, Bizarro would get bored of hanging out with all the versions of him and his wife that lived on Bizarro World. So to have a place to himself to hang out at, he created the Fortress of Bizarro, which was basically his own fortress of solitude. Within it, rather than store important items like suits and stuff, he stored junk and suits. After he was done with it, he returned to his wife to find that the original Bizarro Lois, his wife, had given birth. Unfortunately, Bizarro Jr. appeared human, which the citizens of Bizarro World disliked, causing them to shun Bizarro and Bizarro Lois. Bizarro and Bizarro Lois, despite this, still loved their child very much, with him even gaining superpowers soon, making it all the more difficult for Bizarro Lois to take care of and keep track of him. One day, Bizarro Jr. would go to the other Bizarro's households and attempt to help them, but this would just anger them further to Bizarro Jr.'s confusion. Eventually, Bizarro Jr. would accidentally discover through a reflection in a puddle that he did not look like other Bizarros, which was what caused people of Bizarro World to hate him. Bizarro and Bizarro Lois, despite this, still loved their child and even told him as such. So much so that when the people of Bizarro World demanded that Bizarro use the duplicator ray to change his son into a Bizarro, he refused because he loved his son for who he truly was. Bizarro, seeing that the people of Bizarro World would not accept them or their son, decided to leave with his family to another planet. First, he put Bizarro Jr. in a space pod, then told the citizens of Bizarro that Bizarro Jr. had flown away. Upon the Bizarros looking inside his house with their X-ray vision, they saw that what Bizarro said was true of Bizarro Jr. being gone, and assumed that Bizarro was telling the truth. When Bizarro went back to look for Bizarro Jr., he found that Bizarro Jr. himself was gone to his horror. Meanwhile, the space pod landed on Earth, where it would be found by a young couple who put him in an orphanage, where he was given the name Baby Buster for his amazing strength while being taken care of by Linda Lee, aka Supergirl. Supergirl would soon discover Buster's powers when he destroyed a rattle with his bare hands and he could fly. She would try to chase after him, which she found as a game, and eventually, with the help of Superman, she would catch up to him. The two did not know where Bizarro Jr. came from, given that he looked human, so they decided to refer to him as Buster or Super Baby, and Superman felt that Bizarro Jr. would one day make a worthy descendant. That Superman had Bizarro Jr. fake adopted by robotic duplicates of him and Lois. So that way, while Linda, when she was done with the orphanage stuff, could go to take care of Bizarro Jr. Bizarro would use his X-ray vision to find that Bizarro Jr. was being taken care of by Supergirl and Superman, and Bizarro Jr. was referring to them as mommy and daddy. Though this hurt Bizarro and Bizarro Lois very much, seeing their son happy made them feel that this was meant to be. Eventually, one day, Supergirl would be conducting an experiment, and the experiment would seemingly turn Bizarro Jr. into a Bizarro. Uh, and Bizarro Jr., while being chased around, when with the Supergirl trying to make him not see his reflection, would accidentally make Bizarro Supergirl. Superman then arrived, and seeing that Bizarro Jr. was a Bizarro, decided to let Bizarro Supergirl take Bizarro Jr. because he was a Bizarro and clearly belonged with her. Bizarro would then check on Bizarro Jr. again, only to find that he had now turned into a Bizarro, making him realize, maybe my son doesn't belong on Earth anymore. So he went down to Earth to go collect his son, and but Bizarro Supergirl refused to let him. And Superman tried to help, but he was unable to. Bizarro, for some reason, thought that Superman had secretly planned this and was trying to take Bizarro's son from him, even though Superman said he didn't. Bizarro did not believe Superman and declared war on Earth. Bizarro then left to gather his troops. Superman and Supergirl then came up with a plan where they planted kryptonite on the moon. And Bizarro and his troops were all thought that they could use the kryptonite against Superman and Supergirl. But when they landed on the moon, they suddenly felt weak. This confused them because Bizarros normally aren't weak to kryptonite. However, when they turned around, they found that there was blue kryptonite behind them. And Superman explained that he used the duplicator ray on the kryptonite. This caused the Bizarros to panic and run away to go regroup and make a new plan. Superman and Supergirl then used the blue kryptonite on Bizarro Supergirl, causing her to pass out. While Bizarro Supergirl was passed out, they took Bizarro Jr. back to Bizarro World, with Bizarro Supergirl secretly following behind but deciding to hide on the moon, unaware of the blue kryptonite. That'll be important for later. Superman and Supergirl then delivered Bizarro Jr. back to his parents, and Bizarro, realizing that Superman was telling the truth and that Bizarro Supergirl truly was the one causing all the problems, decided to call off the war on Earth and said Superman, "You're a good dude." Superman accepted this, and then Supergirl felt guilty for seemingly accidentally turning Bizarro Jr. into a Bizarro. However, when they visited another couple on Bizarro World who themselves had a Bizarro Jr., the Bizarro Jr. slowly went from a human to a Bizarro. Apparently, this child had been born just after Bizarro Jr. Supergirl was confused by this, and Superman came to the realization and told Supergirl that her experiment didn't turn Bizarro Jr. into a Bizarro, but that he naturally turned into one because he was a Bizarro. But let's put it this way. So he had the genetics of a Bizarro, but given that Bizarro originally came from someone who looks human, Bizarro Jr. looked human, so it took time for his body to turn to a Bizarro, if that makes sense. With that in mind, Supergirl and Superman returned to Earth and everything went back to normal once more. As the years went on, Bizarro would continue to have more and more appearances, whether as a ally or friend to Superman, a foe, or just a well-meaning ally who accidentally becomes a foe. For example, like when he created Bizarro Batman, but because his and Bizarro Batman's logic is mixed up, instead of stopping crimes, they committed crimes and even freed the Joker. Or there was a time that, due to an accident, Bizarro thought that Bizarro World had been destroyed and blamed Superman and had the Toyman help him fight Superman. Or the time that space debris hit Bizarro and gave him the iconic powers that Bizarro is well known for, those being his ice vision and heat breath. He would even go on to create the Bizarro Justice League and the Bizarro versions of other characters, filling his world from just versions of him and Bizarro Lois to actual other Bizarro of people. Eventually, Bizarro World would be destroyed and all the Bizarros would die along with it, in a very anticlimactic way. A person from the fifth dimension was tired of Bizarro World being in his way, and so caused a cataclysm on it. So, Bizarro, in a similar manner to Jor-El with Kal-El, would put Bizarro Jr. on a spaceship, ensuring he became the last son of Bizarro. But upon sending him away, the spaceship malfunctioned and went right back to Bizarro World as it blew up. Bizarro himself had a bit of a morbid ending in which when the planet blew up, his head was separated from his body and sent all the way to Earth, with him living for 5 more seconds before his body just finally gave out and Bizarro died.
Eventually, Crisis on Infinite Earths would occur, in which the multiverse would be wiped out by the Anti-Monitor. With the destruction of the multiverse, a new one would be created. With Earth 1 having been the only Earth left in the multiverse, aside from a few others, it would take on the name of Earth Zero slash New Earth. This new Earth was a merging of the only Earths aside from Earth 1 left in the multiverse, those being Earth 2, Earth 4, Earth S, and Earth X. In this new history, Lex Luthor had failed to get Superman on his payroll, given that the Man of Steel is naturally a good dude who cannot be corrupted. Angered, Lex naturally resorted to try and make his own Superman, and had a scientist begin cloning Superman. However, when the scientist eventually well, when he'd gotten done, he'd eventually discovered that Superman was not, as him and Luthor thought, a mutated human, but instead an alien from an unknown planet. As a result, the cloning process went wrong and was incomplete. And upon being let loose, upon being freed from the chamber, the cloned Superman hopped out of the pod and immediately fell onto the ground. Lex nicknamed the clone Bizarro due to its failure, and that's what it would be referred to by DC Comics and DC Comics fans. Lex, angered by the failure, told the scientist who created it to throw it out and fired him. Bizarro, despite being thrown out, would eventually begin to show himself slowly. First, helping an ambulance get to the hospital, only for the hospital staff to freak out when they saw his real face. Then saving Lucy Lane from a self-harm attempt. She tried to make herself not alive anymore. Given Lucy was blind at the time, she didn't see that it wasn't Superman and was confused when he left. By the way, if you're wondering, she self-harmed over being blind, which I never do that, kids. Don't. Like, that's a bad idea. Nothing is worth dying like that. Bizarro eventually arrived to the Daily Planet half dressed in Clark Kent persona attire. The real Superman would overhear people panicking and being scared by Bizarro's presence and would go to check it out. Upon checking it out, he would see the freaky creature and would try to have a talk with it, only for it to, in anger, punch him in return for some reason. Superman would battle the creature, but upon seeing Lois nearby and not wanting her to put two and two together, given that the creature was wearing Clark Kent clothes, he used his heat vision to singe the clothes off, which didn't burn the Superman suit off because I guess it's made of Kryptonian fabric. I don't know. The creature then spotted Lois and proceeded to kidnap her and then strangely kiss her because I guess it has Superman's memories. As Superman followed the creature, he found that he put Lois with Lucy to both of their confusions. Superman then arrived and made sure Lois and Lucy were safe before confronting the creature, who he proceeded to fight once more. Superman, upon using his X-ray vision, eventually discovered that the creature was falling apart and that its cells were made of non-living material, meaning, like the original two Bizarros, he could kill it without it counting as murder. So he proceeded to punch Bizarro as hard as he could, blowing it to smithereens, the explosion giving Lucy back her eyesight. Later, Lex, who faked his death, revived himself via cloning with the claims of being his own son, Lex Jr. As Jr., Lex had the public believe that he was different from his father. Where his father had been a criminal who covered his tracks with his money, Jr. was a people person who didn't want anything more than to help others. Of course, this was all a lie, and soon Lex's lie began to catch up with him in the form of the cloning process being unstable, causing him to become ill and dying from Crohn's disease. With no other choice, Lex was forced to revive the cloning experiment he started with Dr. Tang with Dr. Happerson. Like with Tang's experiment, they did not have Superman's DNA, meaning that the clone came out imperfect. Lex demanded that the doctor find some sort of connection between the clone turning imperfect and his disease. When the doctor tried, the clone awakened, attacked the doctor, and fled out of the LexCorp building. Later, when Superman was called away to deal with an accident at the docks, he was accused of having been the one to cause it in the first place while stealing a boat called Lois. Superman realizes that there must be some sort of connection and flew back to his apartment with Lois. While he was doing this, Lois received a knock on the door from someone who seemed to be Superman. Upon opening the door, she saw it was Bizarro to her shock, as she remembered him dying, as we mentioned earlier.
Bizarro then proceeded to kidnap Lois, to Lois's neighbor's horror, when Superman would arrive to find out about the kidnapping. Cat Grant would then report on Superman having allegedly kidnapped Lois. Bizarro would then take Lois to an abandoned warehouse, in which he had made a version of Bizarro World. Bizarro would have Lois act like this distorted version of Bizarro. This distorted Bizarro Metropolis was the real world and real Metropolis, and would constantly, purposefully put Lois in danger only to save her. Lois would try to use Bizarro's attempts to save her as an attempt herself to escape, but it would not work as Bizarro caught right back up to her. Bizarro would then have Lois go to the Daily Planet and write a story about him saving the day. Lois then told Bizarro that what people wanted to hear about would be not about Bizarro saving the day, but where he really came from. Bizarro then attempted to recount his history, only to remember Lex Luthor, and upon remembering Luthor, remember that he hated the man and lash out due to it, putting Lois in more danger. Lois would tell Bizarro to stop putting her in danger, but Bizarro refused, believing that the only way to spend time with her was to constantly put her in danger and then save her from danger. Lois instead convinced Bizarro to get a cup of coffee with her. Unfortunately, the coffee was made of diesel oil, so Lois did not drink it. Lois would lie to Bizarro and tell him that she needed to use the restroom and to not spy on her. Bizarro would agree, and Lois would climb to the top of the Bizarro Daily Planet that Bizarro had made. Bizarro would eventually spot her and think she was in danger all on her own this time. Bizarro would then plow through the other buildings, going as fast as he could to save Bizarro fr- from the Bizarro Daily Planet. Lois would then tell Bizarro that she was alright and to save the city instead because that's what Superman would do. So Bizarro went and did just that while Lois escaped and accidentally knocked the Bizarro Daily Planet over Bizarro, crushing him. Superman would later investigate uh, the Bizarro Daily Planet that had been knocked over, but find no trace of the creature that kidnapped Lois. Bizarro, who somehow escaped the rubble while Superman was investigating, would next be seen trying to stop the drawbridge from opening, mistaking it for the bridge breaking. Bizarro would then use his heat vision to uh, melt the pieces of the bridge together so that way it wouldn't fall. Superman and Bizarro would then fight, with Superman seemingly killing Bizarro in one hit, only for Bizarro to come right back. Superman and Bizarro would then continue to battle until their battle nearly destroyed a parking lot, nearly causing the building to topple over. Superman, in order to not focus on Bizarro and only the building, would send Bizarro into orbit while he fixed it. While in orbit, Bizarro would ponder on what just happened. Everyone rejecting him, even though he quote unquote saved the day, and him fighting another version of himself, that being the real Superman. All of it confused Bizarro. Bizarro then decides to go to Smallville, the place where everything was once simpler, and kidnapped Lana Lang. Lana would mistake Bizarro for Clark, only to see who he was and freak out. Superman would then arrive and the two would battle once more. During the battle, Lana would hit Bizarro with a piece of wood, distracting him long enough for Superman to knock Bizarro out. Given the failed cloning process, Bizarro, like his Earth 1 counterparts, did not have a working heart or brain, causing it to be unknown whether he was alive or dead. Superman would then pick up Bizarro and proceed to take him away, possibly to LexCorp as Lex Jr. had requested. Lex Jr. in quotes, of course, but was scared of the thought that Lex may have his secrets if he gave Bizarro over. Mid-trip, Bizarro would wake up in Superman's arms, and while Superman continued carrying him, he would eventually arrive in Metropolis, where Bizarro saw Lois, and immediately rushed to her, scaring her. Bizarro mistook Lois being terrified for her being angry, to which Superman informed Bizarro that Lois wasn't angry, but he, Superman, was, and began to battle Bizarro. During their fight, they accidentally knocked down a subway railroad, so Superman had to stop fighting to save it. Bizarro would then wonder how to make Lois no longer mad at him, and would witness a young couple get engaged, and believe that if he got Lois a diamond ring, then she would no longer be mad at him. Bizarro proceeded to go to a jewelry store where he bought the giant plastic display ring and paid the cashier in a license plate. Lois, who was looking for Bizarro, would end up running into him, and he would give her the ring and ask her to come with him. Lois would be flattered, but would tell Bizarro that she didn't belong with him. Bizarro stated that she did in fact belong with him, and Superman would arrive and try to talk sense into Bizarro, feeling sympathy for him as he realized that just like him, Bizarro truly loved Lois. Bizarro, however, got mad and still believing that he was the real Superman, that Superman was the clone, would fight against him once more. Superman would then accidentally knock Bizarro into a bridge, causing the two to work together to save the cars that were on the bridge. Bizarro would nearly crush a man with another car, or to which Superman would scold him for. Bizarro would feel bad and then wonder why he can't do anything right. Bizarro would be furious at Superman for knocking him into the bridge, and the two would begin to battle once more. Superman would then realize that Bizarro was weakening, as with every hit, where once he would only knock Bizarro back a little and Bizarro would come right back and punch him back, now he would send Bizarro flying with just the flick of his wrist. During their fight, Lois would fake being in danger, causing Bizarro to come rescue her, unaware it was a trap to capture him. Lois would cry out of guilt for betraying Bizarro, which Bizarro mistook for crying out of fear and attempted to comfort her, only to be stunned. Lois then cried as she held the dying Bizarro in her arms before LexCorp came in and swooped him up. Both Lois and Superman would have pity for the poor creature. Bizarro would then be taken to LexCorp, where he would be put inside a stasis ball until they got him to the operating room. There, the doctor would begin to pull samples from Bizarro, hoping to get the DNA to heal Lex. Eventually, the doctor would get the right sample, but as he was about to pull it, Superman and Lois arrived to save Bizarro, who was dying. Superman would accidentally destroy the console with his heat vision, causing a fire. Meanwhile, Lois would go to free Bizarro, as Superman played firefighter. As Lois did this, Dr. Hamperson would call on a soldier to manually get the sample from Bizarro. Lois would then tell the soldier not to do it, but the soldier ignored her and did it anyway. He'd then give the sample to Dr. Hamperson. Lois would teary-eyed inform the dying Bizarro of what was going on, and Bizarro, using the last bit of life in him, would use his heat vision to destroy the sample to the horror of Lex and I mean the doctor and the soldier. Lois would then overhear the soldier refer to himself in the first person rather than mentioning Lex, and would take the helmet off the soldier to find that it was Lex, to her shock. During the Marvel vs. DC event, an event in which the two brothers from the Megaverse had accidentally switched multiverses. The two brothers were basically personifications of the Marvel and DC multiverses created by the Living Tribunal and the Spectre. They were created a long time ago. However, events such as Crisis on Infinite Earths and Secret Wars caused not only the Living Tribunal and the Spectre to forget that they had existed, given that both multiverses had been basically reset from this event, but it also caused them to switch the two brothers to switch multiverses, which neither of them liked. The two brothers, unaware that the other wanted to get back to his multiverse, began to plot against each other to take back their multiverse, and so made a deal to pit the heroes from both of their multiverses, Marvel and DC, against one another. Whichever heroes or villains from what multiverse won meant the other multiverse would die and its inhabitants be destroyed. Despite Marvel losing at first, with such heavy hitters as the Flash and Superman fighting against and winning against characters such as Quicksilver and Hulk, Marvel would prove to be too strong and beat DC. However, with neither resident of either multiverse wanting to die, the Living Tribunal and the Spectre merged the two brothers together to create the Amalgam Universe. The merged characters from both multiverses. This would create merged characters from both multiverses together. For example, Superman with Captain America creating Clark Kent slash Super Soldier, and Wolverine and Batman creating Logan Wayne slash Darkclaw. It would also give the characters brand new stories and histories to match with their merging. Bizarro, strangely enough, instead of being merged with, I don't know, uh, I don't know who he would merge with, but instead of being merged with someone else, he would be merged with Carnage instead of Carnage being merged with Joker, forming the new character of Bizarnage. Bizarnage was an experiment created by Cadmus in an attempt to synthetically replicate alien DNA. The result was a nightmarish crystalline symbiote that they kept in an embryo birth tube. Unfortunately, due to evil DNA implanted in Reed Professor Richards, an amalgamation of Reed Richards slash Mr. Fantastic and Professor Walter Haley, of the Challengers of the Fantastic,
an amalgamation of the Challengers of the Unknown and the Fantastic Four by rival scientist Dabney Donovan. Geez, and I thought the older comics were weird. Would cause Reed Richards to sabotage Cadmus and free the symbiote. The symbiote would proceed to attack and take over Challengers of the Fantastic member Johnny Red Storm. Spider Boy, an amalgamation of Connell slash Connor Kent slash Superboy and Benjamin Riley slash Spider Man, then arrived and battled the symbiote, trying to stop it from hurting others. Bizarro then decided it wanted to be Spider-Boy, but since one already existed, he had to eliminate him. So to get the chance, he tried to bond with Cadmus director Tom Harper, until Spider-Boy tricked him and said he'd willingly bond with Bizarnage and lured him away, pretending they'd let Bizarnage bond to him. Bizarnage was then sucked into the energy containment cell when Spider-Boy hit a button with his web gun. When the Amalgam Universe was eventually separated, thanks to the work of Doctor Strange Fate, an amalgamation of Charles Xavier slash Professor X, Doctor Strange, and Doctor Fate, Bizarro and Carnage would be separated and sent back to their separate universes. Or given that Bizarro's main counterpart on New Earth had yet to be created, with his other counterparts being dead, he either went back to not existing like his main counterpart, or being dead like his previous counterparts, whatever the case. However, Doctor Strange-Fate, in order to ensure the Amalgam Universe still existed despite the separation, turned it into a pocket universe, meaning that Bizarro still exists somewhere in the multiverse or omniverse as his own separate character from Bizarro or Carnage. Later, during the Emperor Joker storyline, for those unaware of what that is, it was an event in which Mr. Mxyzptlk would accidentally give his abilities to Joker, trying to give them to Superman. In the process, Joker would change everything about reality and even rewrite some hero stories. Anyway, Joker would go on to create the next Bizarro. This would end up being the mainstream Bizarro for New Earth. Bizarro would basically be Joker's version of Superman, take the place of Superman within history, with Superman in a way taking Bizarro's place in history. As in this rewritten reality, Superman was a criminal who allegedly killed Lex Luthor, and Bizarro was a hero and the leader of the JLA, which in this rewritten reality was the Joker League of Anarchy. When Superman escaped Arkham Asylum, Bizarro would be sent after him to get him back. Superman, who knew that that reality was not how it was supposed to be, would run into Bizarro, and the two would battle. Superman would attempt to reason with Bizarro, but Bizarro would ignore his reasonings and continue to fight him. During their fight, Bizarro would briefly accidentally send Superman to Lane Corp Tower before getting him back once more. Bizarro would attempt multiple times to kill Superman, even trying to choke him underwater, but would be interrupted. Unable to kill Superman, he would just dump him into the Arkham Asylum prisons, where Warden Solomon Grundy and Officer uh, Charlie Day looked him over. Eventually, when reality was set back to normal, Bizarro would, well, no longer be part of the Joker League along with the other villains. Upon reality being set back to normal, Bizarro would be confused, scared, and alone, with all of his friends gone, and there was no more Joker League of Anarchy. So he would kidnap slash rescue the only friend he believed he had left, Jimmy Olsen, who during the Emperor Joker storyline was Bizarro's best pal, the Gravedigger. Bizarro would take Jimmy Olsen to his base, which was a grave with the words "Secret Base of Gravedigger Jimmy Olsen" written on it. To Jimmy's confusion, Bizarro then left, promising to come back later. When Jimmy went to talk with his friends, Bizarro would reappear, having found Jimmy, and give him his golden shovel before taking Jimmy once more. Jimmy would then be saved by Supergirl, who he proceeded to share a kiss with, only for an angry Bizarro to attack Supergirl. Bizarro and Supergirl would battle, while Jimmy tried to do something to help until he figured out how to speak Bizarro language. In Bizarro language, Jimmy would tell Bizarro that he was not the Jimmy that Bizarro was looking for, and the best bet would be to find the Jimmy he's looking for in space. Superman would then appear, and Bizarro, remembering that Superman was a criminal in the timeline he was in, would threaten to beat him up and take him back to Arkham. Superman would explain to Bizarro in Bizarro language that what had gone on and how reality had been reset and he didn't belong on Earth and to leave while he still had the chance. Bizarro would do as Superman said and would leave confused as to what was going on when he was attacked by General Zod 2. Zod would then kidnap Bizarro to use as his punching bag to beat something that resembled Superman. Bizarro would then attempt to fight back but fail and be nearly beaten to death. His near-death experience would cause imps to torture him. Bizarro, with the help of Clark Kent, would manage to escape with his sanity being held by a thread.
Bizarro would later become a sort of friend to Superman, one with backwards logic, but a friend nonetheless. So when Bizarro was attacked by Brother Eye, Superman would come in and save him. Bizarro would thank Superman, but would disappear when Brother Eye came back. Bizarro would then overhear Jimmy bad-mouthing Clark Kent out of jealousy, and this would make him confused and mad, given he had the memories of Clark and considered a Superman brother, and heard Jimmy congratulating Superman, so it made him confused and mad. Bizarro would invite Jimmy to the bank, where he robbed the bank of its trash under the threat of painting the wall with his own brains to get Jimmy to write a story on it, which wouldn't work. Bizarro would then think of a new plan while in a noisy facility when he was met by Cheetah, who invited him to the Society of Supervillains. Bizarro told Cheetah he needed time to think about it, but for now his answer was a no. Cheetah, not understanding that Bizarro has backwards logic, did not know that his no was actually a yes, and tried to get him to come back. Later, Bizarro would come to the Daily Planet to announce that he had a news story for Jimmy, which he left breadcrumbs for him. These breadcrumbs, quote unquote, as Bizarro put them, were actually garbage that led to a broken down warehouse that read Bizarro's Lair, with it, as usual, spelt backwards on it. Bizarro revealed he had bombs at the warehouse that he planned to use to blow up the city and part of the world and take over the world, and that he wanted Jimmy to write a story on it. Superman, thinking Bizarro was serious, would shortly arrive and try to stop Bizarro, only for them to accidentally activate the bombs. However, instead of exploding the bombs, the bombs turned out to be fireworks and went into the sky. Bizarro revealed that his plan was to get Jimmy to write false information so that way he'd get in trouble for bad-mouthing Clark. Superman thanked Bizarro, and Bizarro left while Superman and Jimmy made up.
No.
Bizarro then reunited with Cheetah and Zoom to join the Society of Supervillains on the condition that Zoom win a race against him. As Superman dealt with Black Adam and Dr. Psycho, Bizarro would race against and lose to Zoom, at which point Bizarro would reveal that the race was just for funsies, and in reality, he would join Zoom if Zoom just asked him to because he considered Zoom his best friend. Zoom would proceed to insult Bizarro and ask him to join, and given Bizarro's backwards logic, he would take it as a compliment and gladly join the Society of Supervillains and give Zoom a hug, much to Zoom's own annoyance. Bizarro would later be amongst the Society of Supervillains when they ambushed the Freedom Fighters. When Human Bomb attempted to detonate himself to stop the Society, Bizarro would beat him to death, claiming he liked Human Bomb's light. Bizarro would be shocked himself when Human Bomb died due to his beatings, Human Bomb's blood covering his face. 1 year later, Bizarro would be kidnapped by Lex Luthor and forced to watch TV. This would give Bizarro a better understanding of things. Bizarro would later escape and put together a cube-shaped planet near a blue sun. The blue sun would enhance Bizarro's powers and give him quote-unquote Bizarro vision. This new power would allow Bizarro to make duplicates of everyone on Earth, who would end up inhabiting the cube-shaped world named Bizarro World. However, after committing what was considered a crime on Bizarro World, and the people being afraid of him in the first place, the people of Bizarro World would begin to hate him and reject him. Bizarro would disguise himself, like his Earth counterpart, with the secret identity of Bizarro Clark Kent, and would marry Bizarro Lois. Bizarro would then go to Earth and kidnap John Kent and take him to the Bizarro World with plans of asking him how to destroy Bizarro World. Superman would follow Bizarro, but due to looking similar to Bizarro, he would be mistaken for him. While Superman was attacked, Bizarro would boastfully stand in his secret identity with his wife. Tired of all the ruckus and for being confused with Bizarro, Superman burned Bizarro's disguise off, revealing Bizarro Clark Kent to actually be Bizarro himself, or Bizarro number one, as Bizarro liked to call himself, even though he's the third iteration in this universe. Bizarro, angered at Superman for revealing his identity, causing all Bizarros to attack Bizarro, would attack Superman. This would cause the two to fight. Bizarro would give Superman a chance to go home, but Superman would refuse to without his father. Bizarro would then proceed to use Bizarro Vision to make clones of himself, which would help Bizarro fight Superman. However, given that Bizarro had been around the Blue Sun longer, and with his clones, he was stronger than Superman and managed to defeat him. Bizarro then captured Superman and told John Kent that he planned to destroy Bizarro World with his help. Unaware that Bizarro World was secretly planning against him, Bizarro would constantly ask John Kent how to destroy Bizarro World. Superman would try to fight the other Bizarro clones that had that Bizarro had made using Bizarro Vision, but they were just as strong as Bizarro. Bizarro, tired of having to deal with Superman, took him to a dungeon there. There, Bizarro Mixie's asked Bizarro if he could go home. Bizarro told Bizarro Mixie's that he could only go home after he said his name backwards, which Bizarro Mixie's declared unfair as he didn't know even how to spell in the first place. Bizarro Doomsday then arrived, and Bizarro fought him while Superman freed John Kent. Superman filled John in, and John asked Superman if he was going to help save the Bizarros. Superman told John that he didn't believe them to be alive. The other Bizarros suddenly arrived. Suddenly, a beat-up Bizarro arrived himself and apologized to John for kidnapping him when Bizarro Doomsday arrived. Before Bizarro Doomsday could cause any more harm, he was accidentally killed by the Bizarro Justice League when they arrived in a space pod. The Bizarro Justice League would then begin to help Bizarro and Superman fight the other Bizarros. Bizarro Green Lantern, who was a Yellow Lantern, would proceed to scare the other Bizarros away. Bizarro would tell him not to scare Bizarro Lois and to instead scare Bizarro Luther. Bizarro Green Lantern refused as he believed that Bizarro Luther couldn't be scared due to being bald. Bizarro Green Lantern's ring, given that he was technically a Yellow Lantern, began to activate and tell him to come to accord with the Sinestro Corps as he'd been rejecting his duty. Bizarro then attempted to chase after Bizarro Lois, only to see that she was scared of him, horrified himself that she was scared of him. Bizarro would note that now he'd lost two allies, his wife and one of his friends, so he decided to make more, making Bizarro Green Arrow, Bizarro Aquaman, and Bizarro Robin. Before any of the new Bizarro heroes could help Bizarro, they were crushed by Bizarro Doomsday. To Bizarro and Bizarro Batman's horror. After Bizarro Doomsday was defeated, Bizarro would catch up with Superman and John Kent, and once again ask how he could destroy Bizarro World. John would tell Bizarro they didn't need to destroy Bizarro World just because they didn't like him, but instead show why they should like him. Superman would then go into Bizarro Metropolis and begin to fix everything to the Bizarro's horror. Bizarro would then come in and battle Superman to stop him from fixing everything. This would make the Bizarros realize that Bizarro was a good person. Luther would attempt to change their minds, but they didn't believe him, and he would be captured by the other Bizarros. Bizarro then seemingly defeated Superman. Unbeknownst to the Bizarros, this was just a game Bizarro and Superman were playing to get the Bizarros to realize that Bizarro belonged with them. Bizarro would later save the day using a car, causing Bizarro Lois to fall deeply in love with Bizarro. Bizarro Jimmy Olsen suggested that Bizarro Lois and Bizarro have children together, which Bizarro and Bizarro Lois agreed with that sentiment. This version of Bizarro would later have one more adventure in space. Flashpoint would then occur, in which the multiverse would be reset yet be reset yet again. Yes, again. This time by the Flash's time traveling shenanigans. In this new multiverse, New Earth would be succeeded by Earth Zero slash Primer, with all Earths rather than having a hyphen or dash now, just having a space in their designation. For some reason, DC decided this time to have Bizarro and his world take place on a different universe, Earth 29, also known as the Bizarroverse. Superman would visit this world whilst tumbling through the multiverse and help Bizarro defeat Doomsday, only for Bizarro to become Doomsarro, or Bizarro Doomsday, whatever you prefer to call him, through the Doomsday virus. Bizarro, through willpower, would overcome the Doomsday virus and destroy it by going into the sun, and then return to receive Bizarro Lois's love. Somehow, Bizarro, would end up on Earth Zero slash Prime Earth with Superman, uh, and in which he went on a road trip with Jimmy Olsen to Bizarro America, or Canada as we'd call it. Bizarro would eventually return back home, but upon doing so, things drastically changed. Bizarro now had a son in the form of Bizarro Superboy, or Boy Zorro as he was called, and his wife now hated him. Due to the disappearance of the Bizarro Justice League, Bizarro himself would now become very grumpy and hateful. And when Bizarro was seemingly being destroyed, he'd abandon his family to escape the eroding world. Bizarro would then arrive back on Prime Earth, where he'd have a war with the Terrifics, having them fight his team, the Terribles, which were basically the Bizarro Terrifics. Then he'd once again return to his home universe. Then DC, for unknown reasons, would decide, yeah, we don't like having Bizarro be in another universe anymore, so they would have Bizarro be recreated on Prime Earth. This time, they'd take a note from the classics and have Lex once again create Bizarro. Lex would first attempt to create Bizarro in the form of a human test subject named Bobby, the experiment being named Subject A0. However, the cloning process proved unstable, and Bobby exploded. Lex was told it would take a century for them to fully clone another Superman, and Lex was willing to wait. However, during the Forever Evil event, the crime syndicate would cause a power outage, causing the clone to decay. Forced to choose between losing all his progress and starting over, or just accepting the clone as it was, Lex had the tube open, revealing Subject D0, a imperfect clone. The clone proved loyal enough to protect Luthor and intelligent enough to name itself Bizarro. When Mazaz, an anti-heroic version of Lex Luthor and Shazam, arrived, Bizarro would fight Mazaz but be killed by him to Lex's horror. Lex, traumatized from Subject B0's death and promising to change for the better of the world, would cancel the cloning process and order all clones of Superman be thrown out immediately. However, one of the clones would be prevented from being destroyed by the Black Mask, who proceeded to kidnap Bizarro. As far as Lex knew, though, the clone had been destroyed. While Jason Todd slash Red Hood was working undercover and pretending to work with Black Mask, he would undercover Bizarro accidentally with Artemis of Ban Miguel. Black Mask would begin conditioning Bizarro to think he was Superman, but it didn't work given Bizarro's backwards logic and low intelligence. With Jason's help, he would name himself Bizarro and would help Bizarro calm down when he went berserk. Bizarro would be controlled by Black Mask when Roman injected himself with a virus that made it so he could control anyone he wanted. Fortunately, Bizarro's mind was too backwards for Black Mask and paralyzed him, mentally putting him into a coma. Bizarro would join Red Hood and Artemis on their quest to find the Bow of Ra, with the three of them becoming the Outlaws, or the Dark Trinity as they were nicknamed. This rendition of the Outlaws would become the most popular incarnation of the team, with it being what most people thought of first when they thought of the Outlaws. Or at least it was for me that way. I don't know about anyone else, but me personally, whenever I think of the Outlaws, I think of Red Hood, Bizarro, and Artemis. Anyway, during his adventures, Bizarro would do such things as die, be revived by Lex Luthor via kryptonite, gain intelligence by eating kryptonite, and join the Suicide Squad. Eventually, the Outlaws would split up and Bizarro would be picked up by Amanda Waller to join the Suicide Squad. Now that DC had their main universe Bizarro, there was the issue of what to do with the old one. I mean, they couldn't just have two main Bizarros, could they? That would make Bizarro in of himself less special. So, um, through a story arc titled I, Bizarro, taking place directly after Dark Crisis, an event in which all the universes that had been erased by DC's past rebootings of the multiverse were now back, except there was one issue. Earth 29 seemingly had not gotten the memo and disappeared from the multiverse, possibly being destroyed. Bizarro was the only being from Earth 29 left, and with his world gone, he was left confused, scared, and alone. Bizarro would arrive in the Orrery of Worlds, briefly having forgotten what had happened, and unlike Superman, instead of trying to be calm and collected and think, he would begin to attack and go berserk and cause the deaths of most people on the Orrery. The wizards, believing Bizarro to be Kryptonian and trying to prevent more death, would attempt to kill Bizarro with magic, thinking, hey, it weakens Kryptonians, why not work on Bizarro? However, it instead made Bizarro stronger because he's the opposite of Superman, and he killed the wizards. Sometime later, Bizarro would show up on Prime Earth. Superman would attempt to talk to Bizarro, but Bizarro would instead fight him, blaming him for the reason why his world is gone. He would reference how the multiverse is always in crisis, always rebooting, how things are always disappearing. Superman would try to stop Bizarro from enacting his plan, which annoyed Bizarro. To distract Superman, Bizarro would use his ice vision on a helicopter, forcing Superman to save it, giving Bizarro enough time to complete his spell. Superman would at first think Bizarro failed, given he disappeared and seemingly died, only for him to see that everyone was suddenly turning into Bizarro versions of himself. Superman would also realize the crying in his head was actually laughter, because if Bizarro was crying, that meant he was actually laughing. Superman himself then turned into Bizarro. However, fortunately, due to Superman's willpower, he was able to resist the transformation and turn back into himself. This unfortunately gained Superman much hate from the bizarrified citizens of Prime Earth. So, with no other choice, Superman teamed up with the last person you'd least expect, With everyone having been turned into Bizarro, essentially becoming insane, the Joker, like all of the Bizarros, became reversed, meaning that as Bizarro Joker, he was sane. With Bizarro Joker's help, Superman fought Bizarro within his mind, with Bizarro starting out tiny and minuscule. But with every hit Bizarro mentally landed on Superman, he became bigger and bigger in Superman's mind. Superman still refused to give up and would be mentally repeatedly killed by Bizarro over and over again. Bizarro eventually destroyed the sun and the earth before killing Superman once more. This finally allowed Bizarro to take over Superman. Bizarro then threatened to kill Bizarro Joker for helping Superman until Bizarro Joker lectured Bizarro until he could take no more of the lecture and begged him to stop. Bizarro revealed that he was just stalling and was trying to talk to Superman instead. Superman then took control of Bizarro's body and reversed the spell, reverting everyone back to normal. Bizarro was still stuck in Superman's mind and would try to command him to let Bizarro take over, but Superman would just ignore him by being himself. And with that, let's ask the question. What does it mean to be Bizarro? Does it mean to be the opposite of everyone else? Does it mean to, I don't know, try to find acceptance? Because that's what Bizarro's story usually is. It's about a guy who looks different from everyone, acts different from everyone, has different ideas, different cultures, different conditions, different everything from everyone, and he tries to be the opposite of the person he was cloned from. Who knows? But Bizarro has become one of the most popular characters in fiction. Usually he's associated with comedy, being a funny backwards version of Superman. Sometimes he's associated with, I don't know, sometimes he's associated with being a tragic villain and many other things. Bizarro has become so popular in fiction that there are even parodies of him. For example, in the Marvel's Heroes Reborn 2021 event, they turned the Hulk into basically a version of Bizarro. Um, in Transformers, they had the animated comic series during the Transformers Timelines comic series, and in that they had Toxitron, who talked and acted like Bizarro. Even as of recent, Marvel created Wreck-Rap, a weird version of Spider-Man who everyone keeps telling him he has things backwards. He originally wanted a superhero name to be Parker Man, but when he was told that he had everything backwards, he decided to go with Wreck-Rap instead. Wreck-Rap doesn't talk like Bizarro, but in his mannerisms of sort, he acts like Bizarro. He's quite literally the opposite of Spider-Man. In some ways, he tries to be like Spider-Man, but he just ends up annoying the hero, just like Bizarro ends up annoying Superman. So with that, I'm gonna end the video now. I hope you guys all enjoyed. I hope you had a fun time with this video. This video took forever to make, by the way. Like, I have spent the last 3 weeks making this video, and it has been so tiring. I am never making an hour-long video again. I probably am going to eat these words, but like, I'm just saying, for a while now at least, I'm probably not gonna make another hour-long video. Anyway, I hope you all guys enjoy, and I'll see you all next time. Make sure to like and subscribe. Bye!